Hey, what's going on everybody? AnyPride here, and we've got some Vermintide news on the way. So nothing official from Fat Shark Studios yet, let me make that clear right off the bat, but over the last few weeks there have been some pretty big hints pointing towards what the next Vermintide DLC will be. The biggest piece of evidence was at the end of the Quests and Contracts trailer on Fat Shark's YouTube, showing Barton Gorikson, the Dwarf Ranger, hanging out on what was clearly a Dawi bridge with an icy waterfall behind him and snow on the ground. Now, if you look at a map of Reichland and the surrounding area, you can pretty clearly see a theme is developing. Schlüsselschloss and Castle Drachenfels, the two DLCs that have thus far been launched for Vermintide, are both located to the west of the city of Ubersreik, where the main game is set. Schlüsselschloss was built where the River Teufel exits Grey Lady Pass directly to the west of Ubersreik, and Castle Drachenfels is a bit deeper into the Grey Mountains, north and west of both locations. If you follow the Grey Mountains to the south, you will see Karak Azgaraz, almost directly south of Ubersreik, and this is where I believe our next Vermintide DLC will be set. Why do I say that? Well, besides the massive hint we got from Fat Shark in the Quests and Contracts trailer, we also have 4 new level designs that seem to have been leaked or perhaps sneakily posted by Fat Shark themselves. But as you can see, they're pretty clearly legit. They completely fit the aesthetic for the game, they're definitely Dawi themed, and the outside areas look very similar to what Fat Shark has already teased on that snowy bridge. Now, Karak Azgaraz should be a familiar location for most of you. It's the starting location for Skarsnik, Night Goblin Warlord of the Eight Peaks, in the Total War Warhammer campaign. Compared to the surviving Dwarf Holds in the World's Edge Mountains, places like Karak Azul or Karak, the treasure stores of Karak Azgaraz are considered somewhat modest by the dwarfs, but to the Empire, Bretonnia, and the Estalian and Chilean traders that travel through that region, the Grey Mountains, its wealth is legendary. The name means Hold of the Fearless Axes, and much like the other Karaks of the Grey Mountains, it's been under threat from hordes of Skaven and Night Goblins who control much of the labyrinths deep below. It's mostly known as a trading hub, but it has been the site of a few really important events actually in the last couple hundred years. In 2318, about 2 centuries before the beginning of the End Times, the previous king Zaladrin lay siege to Bloodkeep after a group of Dawi were slain by an undead horde and made to walk as puppets. And in that battle, the Blood Knight responsible for this heinous grudge was cut to pieces and his unliving throng laid to rest. A century later, at the Battle of High Mare, thousands of Grobi were killed in a brilliant dwarf victory that was celebrated by all of the Dawi in the Grey Mountains, until a goblin assassin managed to murder both King Zaladrin and Gunrig, his heir, during the festivities. Thungringar, the Orc Hewer, was next in line, and he ascended to the throne, from which he has ruled ever since. So he is currently the king of Karak Azgaraz. So before we go any further, I do want to dispel a notion real quick. A few people seem to think that Karak Azgaraz is the lost dwarf hold that Barton is searching for in Vermintide. During gameplay, you'll sometimes hear Corellian or Barton make mention of this place that Barton is searching desperately for. But Azgaraz is only a few days south of Ubersreik, and it isn't a lost hold. As you can clearly see earlier in the video, it was clearly on the map. So the actual hold that Barton is searching for is Karak Zorn, the infamous lost hold of the dwarfs that lay hidden somewhere along the World's Edge Mountains in the Southlands. Now, the Southlands are the dense tropical jungles to the south and east of Nehekara, where groups of lizardmen and some other creatures dwell, but the other dwarf clans lost contact with Karak Zorn millennia ago. So no one really knows what happened to the hold, although some theories do suggest that they were overrun by lizardmen or the undead, but those who believe in its existence speak of mountains of gold and jewels and other precious things that you would expect from a long-lost dwarf hold. Whether that's true or not, we have no idea, because the fact of the matter is we'll probably never get a game or story set in Karak Zorn or know of what transpired in that hold, but it is definitely not Karak Azgaraz that Barton is searching for. Karak Zorn is half a world away through the Badlands and the expansive deserts of Nehekara, so that will not be the next location for the DLC. So what do I think about a Vermintide DLC set in a dwarf hold? Well, personally, I think it's pretty damn awesome. I think it fits with the aesthetic of the game perfectly, but will also, as you can tell from the pictures, allow us to branch out a bit from the locations we've seen thus far. This is going to sound a little bit weird, but I really like snow levels in games, especially ones that blend nighttime gameplay and winter. I just think torchlight and falling snow makes for a very beautiful setting, and combined with the verticality of the Grey Mountains themselves, what will presumably be some winding pathways and choke points you have to cut through to get inside the Karak itself, I think that could make for some very interesting gameplay and fantastic visuals. The Grey Mountains, like I said, are a very vertical place. They'll have some stunning, expansive views where you get to see much of the mountain that surrounds you, I think. So that's going to be pretty cool. Now, there's obviously not much to go off of yet, but it seems very likely that an announcement will be forthcoming very, very soon, especially if those pictures were leaked by Fat Shark themselves. The art, yeah, well, it's not even art, it's a little gameplay rendering, so I definitely expect to see an announcement in the next couple of weeks, although to be honest, I usually guess that kind of thing and then I'm often very wrong, so we'll see soon enough. Now, I'm expecting this package to be a lot like the Castle Drachenfels edition, the same kind of DLC package, a couple new mechanics to keep gameplay fresh. If you remember the spike traps in Drachenfels and in the dungeon map, the Skaven portals on Summoner's Peak, and the darkness mechanic from the dungeon, where they were all new mechanics that changed up gameplay a bit in Vermintide. And there were, of course, the two new weapons that got added. We got the Waywatcher Glaive that could one-shot clan rats with normal attacks and one-shot storm vermin with charge attacks on Cataclysm difficulty, and we also got the volley crossbow for the Witch Hunter. Now, because this DLC is going to be dwarf themed, I can pretty much guarantee Barden will be getting a new and powerful weapon. There's definitely been a bit of a power creep with the small sample size of DLC weapons that we've gotten thus far. The Glaive is extremely good. In fact, a lot of people think it's the best weapon in the game, and that was a DLC weapon from the Drachenfels DLC. But guessing what that weapon is going to do, as in what Barden gets, is going to be really difficult because, I mean, there's just no way to know what Fat Shark's going to pick for him. Considering the name of the Karak is Hold of the Fearless Axes, it does seem somewhat likely it could be a rune-forged axe of some kind, maybe a two-handed axe that one-shots clan rats in a similar manner to the Glaive, but doesn't quite have the crowd-clearing potential of the dwarf axe we already have in the game. I mean, so far, we have one-handed hammers, we have two-handed hammers, we have two-handed axes, we have one-handed axes, we have shield combos with the one-handed weapons, we have a Grudge Raker shotgun, a handgun, a crossbow, and Drake Fire pistols, and I believe those are all of the dwarf weapons currently in the game. So, besides a miner's pickaxe and a Iron Drake trollhammer or torpedo, there really isn't much left in the dwarf arsenal outside of artillery, which of course Barden couldn't carry around himself, that I think makes that much sense in Warhammer lore for a weapon he could carry around. So it's definitely a possibility that he'll just be getting a beefed up version of a weapon that already exists, but just has different animations and maybe a different kind of style. So that's why I think that the two-handed axe that kind of functions like the Glaive in terms of one-shotting clan rats might be what we see next, but there's really no way to know. So let me know what you guys think in the comments, what you guys think could be his next weapon. But on top of the weapons, it looks like we'll also be getting 3 or 4 new maps set in and around Karak Azgaraz, if the pictures are to be believed. So I will say I'm not really expecting to see a new character at this point. It seems kind of unlikely that we'll be getting a new one before an actual expansion or sequel comes out to Vermintide. If you think about the core gameplay, really the only difference between characters is their weaponry and some slight changes in their movement speed. Besides the heat venting mechanic for the Bright Wizard, everything else is pretty much the exact same between characters, but it's the weapons that differentiate them. So adding a new character doesn't really matter unless new mechanics launch alongside them, and those can be tricky to balance, especially for a small developer like Fat Shark. Then you think about voice acting and how they have to interact with every other character in the game, and those characters need voice lines addressing the new character. It does seem unlikely that right now we'll be seeing something like a Dwarf Slayer or a Warrior Priest or another character, something along those lines, get added. In a sequel or expansion, absolutely, but not in just a normal DLC that's kind of on par with what Castle Drachenfels was, and that is what I'm expecting out of this Karak Azgaraz DLC. So we'll see. I do think it would be a great time to implement a new Skaven enemy type, though, whether that be a Plague Monk or a Censure Bearer or some kind of boss character representing Clan Pestilence. I would like to see that. Again, I would also like to see a new character, but I think this one is a little bit more likely to happen. So far, Clan Eshin, Clan Scryer, Clan Scruton, and Clan Mulder have all been represented. So it's definitely time for our diseased friends from Clan Pestilence to get their time in the spotlight as well. But with all that said, if you are a Dwarf fanboy, you've got to be a pretty happy person right now. King of the Warlord DLC for Total War Warhammer, Karak Azgaraz DLC for Vermintide, very likely on the way. This is the most love Dwarfs have gotten since the Hobbit trilogy, and frankly, a lot of you probably hated those movies, so definitely let me know what you guys would like to see in this DLC in the comment section below. I'll be interested to hear what kind of weapons or characters or new enemy types you think we might run across. And of course, I'm very interested to hear what kind of new mechanics or styles of map you'd like to see that mesh well with the Dwarf Karak theme and Vermintide gameplay in general. So thank you all for watching. I appreciate it. I'll speak to you all again very soon.